Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 350 of the MTGGoldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we have the full crew here this week, kicking things off with the owner of MTGGoldfish, Richard. How are you this fine Monday, Richard?
Hey Seth, recovering from a whole weekend of Worlds. Like literally everyone had Worlds this weekend. Magic, League, like
Worlds.
Everyone.
I gotta say, I was a little jealous because there were some tweets from, was it League of Legends Worlds going on this weekend? And they had Nas and like super famous like musicians making songs about them and videos about them. I was like, oh, come on now. Like, why don't we have that in Magic yet? Like, please. Like, it was still sweet, but I was definitely a little jealous of League of Legends World, which just has such crazy production values. But anyway, before we get into that, we got another co-host in Grim. How's it going today, Grim?
It goes. Yeah, quite a packed weekend. I went from not knowing anything about Worlds to, well, getting being able to watch a decent amount of it. Well, the top 8.
Yeah, I didn't watch as much of Worlds as I intended to because I kind of fell down the Squid Game rabbit hole and started watching that. So I had some Squid Game action going. I still got to catch some Worlds, and then there was also a big Bills game last night. Although that was after the Worlds ended. So I didn't watch as much as I planned. I thought I was going to watch a lot more of it, but I did get to catch some of it. And I got to say, and I guess we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but it was a pretty sweet tournament. Like overall, and that's going to be one of our big topics for today. Actually, we're going to talk a lot about Worlds, going to talk a little bit about something Mark Rosewater shared about Ixalan that's kind of interesting, answer some fish mail. So before I get ahead of myself and start rambling about Worlds, that's the overview for the cast. And I got a reminder for you that our show today is brought to you by Card Conduit. And Card Conduit, you probably heard about them from us before. They are an amazing way to sell your Magic collection, and they're offering a new service that's geared towards selling smaller batches of valuable cards. And with this curated shipment option, like all of Card Conduit services, you don't got to sort your cards, you don't got to grade your cards, you just safely package them up and ship them out, and you'll get a detailed report with the results. And you can check out Card Conduit's curated shipment option as a way to buy list up to 150 cards with fast processing and optimized prices. And you can try it out right now for free. For the month of October, you can use the code SCOOPS over at cardconduit.com/goldfish, and they are going to let you use the curated shipment option without paying anything at all. No fees at all, 100% off. So thank you for Card Kingdom for supporting the show. And they're the easiest way to sell your Magic cards, and this is a great time to do it by using that code. So huge shout out to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And I guess let's just jump into it and start talking about Worlds. So first off, what do you think of Worlds?
Well, I mean, okay, if we're talking from a deck point of view, Worlds was kind of what I thought it would be. Right? Like from a deck point of view, wow. So it turns out Alrund's Epiphany is pretty good. Goldspan Dragon, still pretty good. So yes, but from a narrative point, I actually thought they did a great job, by kind of like talking about like a lot of the top 8 players were just, it was really cool to follow their journey and see how it all went down for them. Like seeing Andre Strosky start off at 7-0 was pretty sweet, right? And then, but most importantly, I think it was like super cool to follow Yuta Takahashi and see how he did. And, you know, for him to win the whole thing after going 0-3 in day 1, that felt like, for the first time, I felt like in Magic esports, some odd reason that narrative just felt really cool. Like it actually felt like I was finally watching, I don't know, the Michael Jordan or whatever big buildup, kind of like wrestling, how they have like build up for all their wrestlers and stuff. And for the first time, it felt like that with Magic.
Yeah, it's definitely cool in these smaller tournaments like Worlds where there's only 16 players that there is a lot more time to focus in on the stories of the individual players. Like sometimes that gets lost in the shuffle when you have, 500, 1,000, 3,000 people playing and people are going up and down the standings. It's hard to focus in on, the stories of the individuals sometimes, but I feel like Worlds and this Worlds was a great opportunity for that. And they did a really good job. And there were some really good narratives to come out of it, despite the Elrond's Epiphany heavy meta. Richard, what did you think watching this weekend?
So I was actually shocked by the number of people watching. I think we peaked at like 50K, like maybe just a hair under, which in my recollection, that's a lot, right? Like we haven't had tournaments have that much viewership in a long time. So that was impressive, especially given all the other esportsy things happening this weekend. That makes it even more impressive. It's not like it was a dead weekend and no one had nothing to do. But I watched basically all Worlds except Limited. They couldn't hook me in for Limited this time because I'm done my Limited playing. Like I've finished grinding on Arena. I'm finished. I don't need to know any more about this. But I think the big story was Goldspan Dragon. Like everyone forgot about Goldspan Dragon. They're like Alrin's Epiphany. They're like, how what's Mono Green doing? What about like Mono White? Mono White kind of had a little spark coming into the tournament. And then Goldspan Dragon's like, look, 2 mana after dropping my threat, pretty good, right? Ramp me up into some more Alrin's Epiphanies, pretty good, right? And people kind of slept on it, if that's even a thing. Like we all knew Goldspan Dragon was good, but the hype around it was not there, and came out in full force. The Dragon decks, people who played Goldspan Dragon with their Epiphanies seemed to do really well. And yeah, so at the end of the day, weirdly enough, we had like two strange decks. We had Teamer Treasures, which is a cute name for saying gruel splashing blue, and then Is It Dragons? So not kind of the decks that we thought were going to be in the finals, but then the rest of the field was what you expected: all the Epiphany decks, all the green decks, and then white decks. Nothing outside of that. So it was kind of all the decks that people were expecting to come in a tournament. But yeah, it was a pretty fun tournament. Lots of good games.
Yeah, there were definitely some really interesting games. And I think it is interesting that the Dragon build of Visit is what won, because that's something that I had mentioned last week, that I felt like the plan of like copying your Epiphanies was kind of a little bit against the odds-esque. Just like, it seems so janky to be like, oh, I'm going to get to like 1 million mana. I'm going to, Galvanic Iteration and then copy my arms a bit. That sounds like something I do for against the odds. And I was thinking, well, what if you just play good cards? Like, what if you just play good cards instead of these like janky spell copying effects? And it seems like in the end, it was, replacing the spell copying stuff with actual threats like Goldspan Dragon, which is just like a powerful standalone, mid-range threat that ended up carrying the day in this tournament and letting the Dragons deck overcome all these other style of more spell heavy Epiphany decks. So I think that was really interesting. What do you think about the meta? So, I mean, I'm looking at the numbers now. We got it over on the site, MTGGoldfish.com. You can see all the breakdown of the metagame and whatnot. But we have Alrin's Epiphany. 62% of the decks were playing Epiphany, and, Expressive Iteration, 56%. There's definitely a huge push towards Is It Splash style decks. Like, that is the foundation of this tournament. How much of this carries over to the real meta? Like, do you think looking at this, this is just a Worlds thing and it's a small sort of inbred meta to some extent where everyone's fighting against what everyone else is doing and you kind of know what each other's doing? Or do you think this is what we're going to see on the ladder on Arena or on Magic Online or at our FNMs? Are we going to see 50% of decks plus playing Alrin's Epiphany?
Yes, 100%. And now that it's a Worlds winning deck, I think it finally got the seal that the card might be good. And along with the whole archetype. It's gonna be around. Unless it gets banned, it's gonna be around for quite some time.
I think it's just incidentally good. Like, it's good, but to me, the winner of the tournament was Expressive Iteration. That card did so much work. It's basically 2 mana, look 3 deep, draw 2, right? Like, that's essentially what this card is. It's what carries you into your Alrin's Epiphany to finish the game, or it's what carries you into Goldspan Dragon. And so, like, these support cards for blue this round are pretty strong. And then so it's just natural that when you have so many strong support cards, you take an extra turn. Why not? Right. So, yeah, I think Epiphany is here to stay. Like, how do you fight this? We already saw people try to fight it, right? Like Teamer, mono green, mono white. They weren't too successful. Like, it just felt really bad. Like, you felt for the players, like, oh, they're doing stuff, they're winning, the Is It players down to like 1 life, you're just almost there. You're still at 25 life, and they're just like, all right, I cast Fork again. Alren's Epiphany. I have 18 damage and birds. I kill you, right? Like just out of nowhere. So it's a combo finish and it feels really bad, but like that's what people are doing. So I expect to see that happening. The only way to interact with it is counter spells, but when they're copying their Alren's Epiphanies, you need to have just as many counter spells, right? You need like 3 counter spells or whatever, 2 counter spells to deal with this. So it's pretty tough. So I expect this to be the meta going forward. Maybe we get a little more aggressive or more control-y or something with our Izzet builds, but I think the Izzet core is just really strong. So that'll be the base of the decks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably likely. I don't know about 62% of the meta. That's a pretty high number that I'm not sure I would see carrying over to like the ladder or whatever. Hopefully it doesn't, because that's a lot for any one card, especially, something like Alren's Epiphany, which isn't, a consider or some utility spell that shows up in a ton of different decks. This is like the big payoff for a bunch of different decks. So hopefully it's not quite that high. Is it a good meta? Like, let's assume that we do see a meta something like this, where Epiphany is at the top of the format. There's kind of a conversation going on Twitter as the tournament was happening, with people talking about, okay, we got to ban Epiphany, or no, we don't have to ban Epiphany. Like, are we at that point? Are we having this conversation about bannings already? Or are you more in the camp of, we got another set that's coming out in, I think, less than a month now. It'll be live on Magic Arena, and shortly after that in paper. Are we just in wait and see mode? And is the wait and see mode even going to matter? Is there something they can make in Innistrad Crimson Valve that's going to suddenly shake up the meta to such an extent that the Izzet decks are no longer dominant? So where do you fall on that debate that's been happening the last couple days?
I just don't know what could get printed that all of a sudden makes Alren Epiphany bad. Like, there are obviously things that could happen, but it just doesn't seem likely. So I don't know. I mean, it looks like it's here to stay until something either A gets banned or I mean, what makes whatever gets printed and is somehow better than Epiphany is scary.
Yeah, I guess that's a concern.
Is it a better meta? I don't, is it a fun meta? As of right now, I don't think it is. It was when, the set was new, there's hype and all that stuff. But right now, I'm just not a fan of where Standard currently is. However, I mean, that's why I've just been like delving into more historic, just because that seems to be more fun. And Alren's Epiphany's too slow there.
Yeah, I mean, do we really want to be at that point already, though? Like, we just had rotation. Like, I think that's a good technique, and that's my technique, too. If I'm not enjoying one format, I play another format. But we're a month after rotation. It's a little concerning that some players might already be shying away from Standard because of the meta that soon after rotation, or maybe that's just how things work in 2021 in the age of Arena, and how fast the meta develops and is solved. Maybe that is as much as we can hope for, is a month of a fresh meta before we kind of move on to the other things and wait for another set. What do you think, Richard?
So there's always a best deck, right? And there's always a best card in Standard. Does that mean it should be banned? I don't know, right? Like, to me, Alren's Epiphany is just a combo finish, and people are just very salty over it, right? Like, I don't know. There's something salt-inducing about having your opponent take multiple turns, right? But you're playing basically essentially 7 mana, right? Maybe 6 to take an extra turn. That's your bomb, right? You should kind of win when you get there. So to me, the problem with the deck is the cards that actually make you get there, they're too good. The learn cards are good. Expressive Iteration's too good. And then, so, just go to any other Standard. Like, if you just slammed a Titan or something there, right? There's more counterplay. You can Wrath or something after Titan. There's no counterplay to Epiphany. But essentially, the control deck just makes it to 8 mana they win. Like, is that really bad? Like, I don't know. I think that's fine. It's just they're able to consistently make it that far easily. That's the problem, right? And our aggressive decks aren't aggressive enough to actually take them down. So I'm fine with Epiphany. I don't know if we need to balance the decks. I'd rather balance like Expressive Iteration or something like that, because like in a lot of the matches we saw at Worlds, people boarded out their Epiphanies, right? Like, they're like, I don't need Epiphanies, right? I'm just gonna load up on removal, and I'm going to sit there and play control without even using Epiphanies at all. and that was enough, right? So I would consider other cards in the deck, like maybe even the Dragon, right? Or Expressive Iteration, or the Learn cards, or something like that. That shell is just very powerful, and Epiphany is just riding the finish.
I fully agree. I think that yes, there's usually a best deck, right? But the thing here is this pattern of extra turns is just not what you like to see in your game. So I think it's the pattern of play that's a little problematic. And even if it's not, it's not that it's like the most powerful thing in the entire world. I think the biggest thing here is that it's what it keeps out, right? Like you can't play a mid-range deck. Like so that's my current issue with it. Like this whole shell is very powerful, but it just keeps I can't just play a fair Rakdos mid-range. I can't play any kind of fair deck.
Is it because you can't Thoughtseize it?
Well, you can't Thoughtseize it.
Yeah,
it's hard. You can't the test
difference?
of wills it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably that like you can't rip it, right? From anywhere. It's always going to be there. And you can't do anything about it.
It is hilarious that Foretell is so relevant there when it's kind of like not the most powerful mechanic in most of the other cards. Like there haven't been, a ton of crazy Foretell stuff going on except for Alrund's Epiphany. And with Alrund's Epiphany in specific, being able to foretell it is really huge. Like I've noticed that as well, that it's like Duress you would think would be great against like the Izzet Epiphany deck or the Grixis Epiphany deck. But a lot of times it's kind of meh. Like it's not horrible, but it's definitely not, the Thoughtseize level answer that you would expect from Historic or Modern or something, because it's so often hanging out in the Exile Zone. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'm in favor of having changes at this point. I think if we were waiting until January and it was the old set release schedule and we weren't getting another set for 3 months or 4 months, then I might be more, itching for something to change. But as it is, because we have another set coming out so quickly, I'm kind of willing to just wait another month and see what happens. I'm a little bit with Crim in the sense that it's hard for me to imagine this Izzet shell suddenly getting way worse. Like, I don't know what Wizards could print that is going to make the Izzet shell not good. But I am willing to wait and take the chance and see. I think you also had a really good point about the support cards, Richard, but I don't know. Alrund's Epiphany is just such a feel bad, and extra turn spells at this point, post Nexus of Fate, just have such a bad reputation and are so disliked. Even though you're probably right that the best way to power down the deck would be hitting the card draw, hitting an Expressive Iteration or whatever, something like that, hitting Goldspan Dragon. I imagine that if it does come down to it, they're probably just going to ban Epiphany, because I think there would be a big freak out if they announce bannings and it's another Izzet card and not Epiphany. Just imagine the Magic Arena subreddit that day or whatever. People would be freaking out because people just really don't like the play pattern of extra turn spells. So I kind of think that if something does change eventually, it'll definitely be Epiphany just because of that.
All right. I posed you guys a question. Is there a control finisher that is not salt inducing? People weren't happy with Nexus of Fate, right? That's the same. That's extra turns. I get that, right? Wilderness Wreck, right? We didn't like that. Teferi, Big Fairy, no one liked that either.
I liked it.
Well, okay, you liked it.
What about Morphling, Etherling? Are those still?
Etherling versus Lovestruck Beast?
Pearl Lake Ancient was good.
Pearl Lake 8. But did people actually play that in general or just in control mirrors?
Yeah. In for control decks, yeah. And then of course there was Blue Black that just used Ashiok, 3-mana Ashiok, and Perilous Vaults, creature lands. It's just extra turns. I think extra turns is what makes it miserable.
So we want Ojutai, basically these creatures that cannot be interacted with, basically, is what the control finisher should be.
I mean, I actually think you have a good point though, Richard, as you talk about it. I think that people get salty about control, period. The people that are most salty about Izzet are just salty about control because people like their spells to resolve or whatever. So I think to some extent, maybe people are misdirecting their rage a little bit too much towards Epiphany, when actually what people are feeling is, I don't like having all my spells divided by 0 and all my stuff die the turn it hits the battlefield. Really the same play pattern, and then you win with something else. I bet people would still be complaining. Although I do think the extra turn spells are their own special kind of salty, even more so than those other finishers. But I do think people would be if the same Izzet deck without Epiphany was 50% of the meta or whatever, I think you'd still hear people complaining about it.
I mean, I think like the fact here is that Alrund's Epiphany is good enough to make mono white splash blue. So, so like it's I don't care if it's a control meta. Clearly, I mean, I don't care if we sat around because like playing through the Cobblade mirrors, right? Like all of that's fine. Fairies mirrors. There's lots of tempo / control decks that have existed through its time, and for me that's not the problem. I've just always had a problem with extra turn spells, so I don't know why they continue to make extra turn spells. I guess.
I would be surprised if they did continue after this. I think after Alrund's Epiphany, I bet we see a break for a little while, at least in Standard. Probably show up in like Commander or whatever supplemental sets, but I don't think we're going to see another extra turn spell in the short-term future in Standard.
I really hope we don't.
I'm sure we're going to see it. I'm sure Wizards has decided that they fixed it, and then Magic players will find some way to break it. Because I am pretty sure they did not intend Epiphany to be a Standard staple. I am like 99% sure they did not intend it to be so.
Yeah, no, they definitely didn't intend Nexus Fate to be a Standard staple. They were pretty clear about that, and that ended up breaking the format. So let me ask you, you're going to play Standard this week. You're going to your FNM. You're playing on the ladder, whatever. You don't want to be the dirty Epiphany player. What do you play? Like, what deck do you play to try to have a chance to fight against a meta that's going to be very full of Alrund's Epiphany over the next couple weeks?
The blue-white deck. The Azorius Tempo deck. It's really good. I mean, having main deck, like Hermits, I mean, yeah, sure, the backside makes stuff uncounterable, but the front side of it is like the pay 1, make them pay 3, right? Like, Hermit is very good. And I've also really liked Hermit through, well, I guess a multiple... like a bunch of formats, really. So I think it's you can apply pressure, you can get underneath a lot of their nonsense. So yeah, I'm a fan.
I just play mono green. I haven't been having too much trouble with Epiphany deck. You just load up on Snakeskin Veils, right? And you kill them before they can Epiphany. So I don't feel it's like unbeatable. Like I feel there's ways to alter your build to take care of this. You throw in some Toskies, you just like draw a full grip of cards. Like there are ways to get around it. Like they're a bit slow and dirtily. So you just gotta watch out for their like galvanic iteration removal. So like Snakeskin Veil does a trick.
Is that not problematic though? Like okay, well we pretty much all have to get under it now. Essentially,
I mean, who's gonna out control a control deck, right? Like, yeah, you gotta get under it.
But mid-range decks could exist before and fight it.
Oh, that hasn't existed for a long time, Krim.
What?
When's the last time a mid-range deck could trump a control deck? Like,
I mean,
Thragtusk days?
Saltimatum was pretty much that.
Would you call that a mid-range deck?
I would.
I always kind of thought of it as more of like a ramp combo deck personally, but yeah, I think you're right that it's not unbeatable, but I think you also are going to have to have a plan for it. Like you got to know going to your FNM or going to the ladder that you're going to play this deck quite a bit. Like yesterday I was trying to do some recording for an upcoming video and I played 3 Epiphany decks and then I was like, okay, I'm not going to record another Epiphany match. If I run into a deck that, shows me that isn't mana or whatever, I'm going to assume it's Epiphany. I'm just going to scoop because I don't want to just have a video that's 5 matchups against Epiphany. And then I scoop like 4 more times in a row, I think, before I hit a non-Epiphany matchup. So you're certainly going to play against this a lot. I think another dark horse is we have seen some Dimir control decks. They didn't show up at Worlds in specific, but in a lot of the SCG qualifiers that have been going on, people have been posting really solid records with Dimir control that is not playing Alrund's Epiphany, like more traditional non-extra turn control that's using like Xanathar for a finisher, using Leer as one of the finishers, and then just overloading on like all the removal, all the counter spells, and just trusting that you got the removal for the green decks and the white decks. You got the counter spells to deal with the Alrund's Epiphany decks. So I think that might be the other way to go. Maybe there is a way to actually out control the control deck to some extent. We'll see if that actually holds up, but I think it's got to be one of those two options. I don't really think the mid-range plan is very practical right now. I think the mid-range plan is going to get super wrecked. You either got to try to be more controlling and have enough counters that you can stop Epiphany, or you got to try to be, as Richard said, really aggressive and try to get in under it. Is it good to have a meta where mid-range is not really a viable option? I don't know. I think in a perfect world, mid-range would be viable. But at the same time, we got another set coming. And green can be a little mid-rangey, like Azeka's Chariot into Ren in 7. Like, that's kind of mid-range feeling. So I could see that being maybe white's the aggro deck, green's the mid-range deck, and then Epiphany's the control deck, and we got rock, paper, scissors, sort of, kind of.
I think we need stacks. Like, with the power level of combo decks / control decks in standard, we need stacks to even the battlefield, right? Like, we need to like stop the double spell, right? Like a Thalia effect, like a good Thalia effect, right? If you want to be very specific, you can make like opposition agent for extra turns, right? But like you need ways to slow people down to prevent them from comboing, which is what we have in older formats where combos are actually a thing, right? Like you slow down the game for them so that your actual 2-mana 3/3s can actually get in and kill them in time. But we don't have that in standard. There's no real way to kind of interact. Like, the Epiphany's coming, but you can't do much. You just got to kill them before it comes. Like, you can't slow them down. You can't even like duress it nowadays. But if you had like Thalias, if you had Aethersworn Canonists, like things like that, you could slow them down such that you can actually get there with like dirtly creatures.
So something else I wanted to ask you about Worlds, a little bit off the topic of the meta in specific, is the viewership. We had 50,000 people-ish watching on the main channel on Sunday. There were also like co-streams where various people were streaming with their audience. There were also streams in other languages, so the number is somewhat higher than that. And I did a bit of digging back at old past tournaments. This was, at a minimum, the most people watching a Magic tournament since February 2020. So that's almost 2 years ago now, more than a year and a half ago. And before that is when we had all the embedded streams, so views were really wonky and it was really hard to know how many actual people were watching and how much of it was like kind of advertising, bumping up the views. So this might be one of the most watched tournaments of the entire Arena era, actually. Like, this was a huge viewership number for Magic. Do you think this matters? Does this change anything? Like, organized play still hasn't really been announced. We know the MPL's ending. We don't really know what the future is going to hold. Does getting a big number like this for Worlds show Wizards at all that organized play, competitive Magic, streaming competitive Magic on Twitch, having GPs or Pro Tours or whatever, something, does it show Wizards that there's an appetite for that and people are going to support it? Like, does this increase the odds that we get some sort of sweet organized play system coming out in the hopefully not super distant future?
I don't know, like maybe, but it took Worlds. It had to be Worlds, right? Like, to finally get people to tune in.
That's true. You can't do Worlds every weekend at it like a GP. Like, this is a once a year huge thing. So that is a fair point.
I wonder if it's accidental. The number is so high that I call it into question. Like, were they embedding? Is it the perfect storm where someone like came to watch like League of Legends Worlds, so they typed Worlds in Twitch, and then Magic showed up, and they're like, I guess I'll watch Magic, right? Like, it was kind of out of nowhere and very high for such a small tournament. Like, I mean, it's a big tournament, but it's like a small player pool, right? And like, if I recall correctly, like back in the day, like the new set release Pro Tours like usually outdid Worlds. Like, Worlds was kind of like pretty underwatched compared to the other stuff in the heyday. So, I'm a little curious if the numbers are actually indeed correct. I don't know that Wizards is forward thinking enough to actually like take advantage of it. Like, like coming off the back of their Arena, like paid botting, like, 100,000 views, they didn't really do anything with it, right? They didn't really snowball that into anything more. And they kind of actually just started cutting organized play. So I don't know if this is enough for them, or, maybe they're just like, Worlds is where it's at and we just do Worlds once a year and call it a day. But I can't see like the Grand Prix circuit coming back or something because of this. But maybe they try to do like more Arena style like leagues or something, like, like GPs but on Arena.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's got to be something there. And I do think the number's probably legitimate. Like maybe they were on the front page of Twitch at some point, which is still legitimate, but that would boost the views to some extent. But we've had tournaments in the past year, some of them that have gotten in the mid 30,000s or something. They haven't all been just huge flops. Like Kaldheim Championship Finals had 39K as its peak. So going up to like 50 doesn't seem like a huge stretch, although it is a really big number for Magic. I'm hoping that Wizards gets the message that people do care and that they should at least do something, even if it's subsidizing Channel Fireball or Star City or some other tournament organizer to do some sort of series. Like, there are people that are going to watch it, and I have to think that 50,000 people watching is enough to make it worthwhile. Like, I don't know. I tend to think this is important to the future of organized play, at least to some extent. Like, it's much better than doing Worlds and having it be 10,000 people, or some of the MPL numbers that we saw where they did this huge MPL thing and would have 3,000 people watching on Twitch, which individual Magic streamers were getting. So I feel like this was a win for Magic streaming. Whether or not it has the long-term effect that I'm hoping for, I guess, remains to be seen. But I do think it at least, nudges things a little bit in that direction. If Wizards was on the fence, like, are we going to even do organized play? Seeing a big number like this would have to be at least, a check mark on the pro side of the argument. So I'm hopeful that we get some sort of organized play announcement and that we do have future tournaments like this, because it was actually really sweet. And to some extent, it felt like an old pro tour. We had Reddit talking about it. We had Twitter talking about it. There was the community as a whole, it seemed, embrace this event. And it happened on a weekend with football going on. It happened with League of Legends Worlds going on. There was a lot going on, and a lot of people did make the time to watch this event. So I think it is a little bit more hopeful for the future of organized play now compared to where it was, a week or two ago. So I'm hoping that maybe something good comes out of this.
So counterpoint, Seth. We still don't have spectator mode. Right? If Wizards was actually going to invest in any of this, don't you think the first thing they would have done is made spectator mode, so I don't have to watch someone streaming with potato internet and 5 FPS? Like, why don't we have spectator mode, right? Like, if we're actually going to invest in esports and make esports, like, the fact that we still don't have it and we haven't heard a peep from it tells me, like, they're not willing to invest much more into sports.
I mean, I will say, we talked about how League of Legends Worlds was also going on this weekend, and I was a little bit jealous watching just like my Twitter feed over the weekend. Some of the stuff for League of Legends Worlds was pretty sweet. They had like Lil Nas X doing songs about it in videos, and just it would sound a whole different level. And that's not to say that Magic and Magic esports should or could ever get to League of Legends level, but there is a pretty stark difference between like League of Legends Worlds, which seems like an actual thing even almost outside of the esports community. It's almost broken mainstream to some extent, when Magic Worlds, yeah, it was a big thing for the Magic community, but it certainly isn't something where we have like some of the most famous, artists doing songs about it or something and posting it on their social media. So I don't know. It was a weird weekend. Like, I felt like it was good for Magic, but then at the same time, I got to see real esports and the sort of reaction that, a top level biggest esport, one of the biggest esports in the world gets from doing their worlds. And we aren't even in the same, galaxy, I don't think at this point. As something
our
like
Worlds
that
is like a normal event
Esports,
for like some of
the
these.
esports at home.
Yeah, we are the Kirkland brand of esports currently. Yes.
So any other Worlds thoughts before we move on and talk about a couple other things? All right, so we got some interesting news from Mark Rosewater's blog this week, which involved Ixalan. And someone asked Mark, what was the last set that really underperformed? And Mark said that it was Ixalan block. That was the last time that they had a set that majorly underperformed. And I thought that was actually really interesting. So obviously Ixalan was a few years ago now. It has a reputation of being pretty underpowered. And it made me wonder, do you think the failure of Ixalan is part of what led to the huge power creep we saw, like starting a year or 18 months later. If you think about the amount of time it takes for Wizards to design a set, it seems like it's, a year and a half or something. They're working on a set that's going to come out a year and a half, 2 years from now. The timing would kind of line up that they would get the numbers on Ixalan and see this big failure and maybe be like, okay, we can't do this again. We can't have a set that's so underpowered because apparently players don't like it and they're not going to buy it if we have this really underpowered block. And then they just push the power level super, super high. Am I making connections that aren't there? Or do you think that the failure of Innistrad from a sales perspective is part of what led to Core Set 2020, Eldraine, all the crazy power creep that we saw, a little while after?
I think that Eldraine, I do think that there is a little bit of that. There's a little bit of that for sure. Because let's be honest here. Holy cow, that set was bad. Like that set was real bad. Ixalan, that is. So, I pine for the days where actually, no, I still hate Carnage Tyrant. But the thing here is that card is still miserable. However, yeah, like that was such a bad format that I'm not surprised it was their big failure. And on top of that, I wouldn't be surprised if that's why we had a power creep.
I think so. Power creep is the easy solution, right? Like if you don't know what to do, just like pump the numbers and it will sell. Just like you have a master set, like throw some fetches in there and you're solved, right? Like we can always fix it with that. I don't know if it was actually the problem though. Like I still contend that power level is not what makes Magic entertaining. Right? Like people still play limited after playing standard, or they play limited after playing vintage, right? You don't all like discard standard because modern is more powerful, right? Like, you can still have fun with lower power. So to me, maybe it's like the themes, like thematically, the world, what they did with the creatures. Like maybe they expected dinosaurs to carry hard or something, but people weren't having green merfolk, right? Like green, like you think merfolk, you don't think green, right? So they added this and maybe that didn't jive with people and they didn't care. Like, normally vampires and merfolk and stuff would be very popular, but they don't seem very popular from this set. So maybe it's because vampires aren't supposed to be white. I don't know, right? Or maybe it's kind of the aesthetics of the world. Or maybe it's just all of them combined, right? So I'm not sure, but I'm not 100% like sold that it's just power level.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I think it's got to be at least partly power level. It seems like in general, there's at least a little bit of correlation. Like Dragon's Maze was also not very powerful, and it seems to be pretty widely disliked. Kamigawa, not very powerful. I know it has a cult following now, but it's also like, if you look at Wizards, the numbers that they show, various like storm scale type stuff, is generally not considered to be a super powerful plane. So I think there's some correlation. And it seems like dinosaurs, pirates, that seems like a winner, right? When you think about the theme, if you said just those things, that seems like the kind of stuff that people would maybe buy a set for, but I don't know, maybe it's actually not. It feels like you could do Ixalan and have those same themes and have the same tribes and have it be successful, but I don't know, maybe people just really don't like dinosaurs or really don't care about pirates or the colors of the vampires, as Richard said. So I think it's interesting that they actually said, though, that it was a failure. Maybe it's been long enough now that they feel comfortable saying that. So yeah, I guess the good news is sets have apparently sold pretty well since then. And those sets have been in general pretty powerful. So I guess we'll see what the future of standard holds.
I'm waiting for the economy downturn and then we're going to get like Black Lotuses in standard.
Yeah. Oh, also, this is unrelated news, but I think Mark Rosewater also this week, or maybe it was the week before, pretty much said like, stop asking about the reserve list. I think he said, I've done everything I can. I've asked everyone, like, we've tried to do this. It's not going to happen. You will be happier if you just come to grips with that, essentially, and just come to grips with the fact that the reserve list is never going away. So I don't know if we get literal Black Lotus, but yeah, I definitely see what you're saying there. Anyway, I don't think we have any other big topics for today. The only other quick thing I want to mention is we got another sweet APAC promo, Year of the Ox promotion with an Angrath Flame chained. So I don't know how you get those from outside of the APAC region, but it is a pretty cool looking Angrath Flame Chain promo. So anyway, let's answer some fish mail. I think we got some good fish mail questions this week.
All right. If you have questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmails. Fishmail, plural, singular, not plural. And we'll get to your questions on air. Felix747. I'm 14 years old and I'm trying to get into competitive play. I quickly realized that any online tournament with any sort of cash prize is age restricted. For me, who's gone as far as I can with Arena and FNM, #1 Mythic and winning FNM, it is extremely frustrating. Do you guys worry about MTG's competitive future if the younger generation is shut out of tournaments? And what about Magic's future in general? Most kids who play Magic aren't invested in the long run.
So actually, quick question before we answer this fish mail. Do either of you know why anyone under 18, I believe it is essentially banned from playing tournaments? I've seen this come up a couple times where players have like qualified for something and then found out that they couldn't actually play because they're not old enough. Like, is this common in other similar games? Or I don't know. Why is there this age restriction for playing arena tournaments?
You know, I think it just has to do with the fact that there's money involved. Right? Like, if it weren't for that, would it really matter?
Yeah, like
but you don't even have to pay anything.
So this is a common thing, right? Like, for example, I know like in like other esports, like players are ineligible to join the league until they hit a certain age. So you have like these young kid prodigies that are like just waiting to hit the right age to be able to join the league. I don't know, right? Because we have special laws for people under 18, like kids, right? Like even like YouTube and stuff, they have like different things, right? If you make a video for kids, you follow a completely different set of rules, right? So I think it's somewhat related to that about like earning money and getting parental consent or something. And I don't know if people are just being lazy. Like, you know, you could accept kids, but they don't want to go through the extra work of doing the extra steps, or if there's actually something like in the law that makes it dicey for them and they don't want to actually do it, it exposes them to some risk. But I don't think it's specific to this. Like I've seen this in other esports and other things, but I don't know what the greater issue is.
Okay, so it's not just a Magic thing then, because I think obviously I would like it if people who were, I don't know, 13 plus or 14, like pick some age in there where if you're under 18 but over a certain age, with your like parents' approval or whatever permission, you would still be able to play in events, because I do think it's important to get younger people into the game, and the way that's going to happen is probably through Magic Arena, and you want to be able to go to that next step, and Arena's kind of lacking that next step if you can't play in the tournaments. So I wish there was a way that could happen. As far as being concerned about the overall future of competitive play, it's definitely something that we're concerned about. That I'm concerned about. We were talking about it earlier. We don't even really know what's happening with competitive Magic, or if there will be official competitive Magic and organized play going forward. So I think the fact that the younger generation might be getting shut out to some extent is part of that concern, but there, from my perspective, are a whole bunch of reasons to be a little bit nervous about what's going on with organized play, just because we don't know. We don't know what the future of competitive Magic looks like, and it's been a few months and we haven't really heard an update. And I know we still got pandemic stuff, and it's not like Wizards could just announce GP starting up, next week or something. Like, yeah, that's probably not practical, but it would be nice to hear some sort of news about this. What would you say to Felix in specific? Felix wants to play competitive Magic. He's at the pinnacle of what he can currently do on Arena. What's the next step for Felix if he wants to keep, progressing as a Magic player?
Oh, I think at that point, my recommendation is to just keep grinding it out, playing the tournaments, just have fun with it, worry about the tournament circuit until something can actually be improved. Like for right now, it's just out of your control, unfortunately. And all you can do is just enjoy the game long enough until you are of age to play at a competitive level. Like even as a kid, I feel like there's tons of others out there that are under the whatever the required age right now that are just playing to play the game until they can go more pro with it. You can be like the kid prodigy. That'll be like a narrative they'll spin on your next big tournament entry.
Yeah, so I think this is something like related to online, right? Because we know that people under 18 can play in Grand Prix, right? Like we have Dana Fisher and other people under 18. And then like I know when I used to play PTQs and local tournaments, like there were people under 18 playing all the time, right? So you have to wait for the online scene to catch up, and then I guess wait for tabletop paper Magic to come back.
Online scene, like the people that run Moto, and we're still waiting for that to catch up. My dog's even waiting for it to catch up.
Like I wonder if it's an official like arena open. Is it age restricted, or is it only
yes?
Oh, it is. Okay, well that's interesting.
It says arena open. I was just actually looking up this up as we were talking. You got to be 18 or the legal age of majority in your jurisdiction. So I guess if the age of majority is different in your country than it is in the US, then that would also be fine.
Yeah, to me, so I think it's something to do with like online and kid protection or something, like because like if it's an official Wizards tournament, they allow people under 18 to play at Grand Prix, right? So why would they disallow for arena?
I mean, we have very famous examples of people who are like 8 or 10 or 12 like making content and going to Grand Prix, so we know that it's fine in paper. I also am very curious, and I haven't been able to find the answer to this, but I wonder if it's the same on Magic Online. Like, can you play leagues on Magic Online? I assume so. Like, I assume that you would be able to do it, but I don't know. I don't know what the restrictions are there, because I was thinking maybe that was a potential workaround to play on Magic Online instead of Magic Arena, but I would have to try to confirm the terms of service for Magic Online as well. It's weird because it's 13 and up. Like, that's what they market it to. So there's got to be something with online that we're just not seeing, some legality or issue or whatever that's keeping this from happening.
That's for playing for fun, Seth. You can play for fun if you're 13 up. If you're playing competitively, you need to be at least 18 to handle like the trauma that's coming your way.
Yeah,
the multiple fours on your like lower bracket like do or die matches, like multiple five. Okay, cool. I'm going home. All right. Next question. A palpical. Pretty sure you guys should do a Street Fighter. Oh, you should go with Street Fighter for movie night. I'd be happy to donate my DVD to the cause.
Oh, no.
Okay. I'm actually very curious. I want to rewatch Street Fighter.
Not that DVD, please.
It's got to be good.
It's a little concerning that the person sending us the fish mail is so eager to get rid of such an amazing DVD. That makes me a little bit nervous.
Do DVDs even exist? That's my question. Are we getting VHS? I don't remember how old this movie is.
So, what would be the best movie night movie we could do? We've been talking about
Dungeons
doing this for
Dragons.
a couple weeks now. Dungeons. Okay. I've never seen that.
Wait, I forgot. Is it so bad that it's good, or is it just so bad that it's bad?
It's so bad. It's just flat out bad. Like
no, it doesn't even cross into the entertaining threshold. I don't know. You have to ask chat. What's like an old movie that people would want to watch?
Yeah, well, we'll have to do a poll. Maybe I'll put it. Let us know in the comments if you're listening to this on Twitter on YouTube, and you can actually comment, or on Twitter if you see the tweet. Let us know, what would your choice be for Goldfish movie night? What movie should we watch?
How about a fish movie? Is there a movie about like giant fish?
Finding Nemo.
Finding Nemo.
Jaws. Big Fish. There's a few.
Oh, all right.
Big Fish is actually pretty good.
Self-shoots. In your last episode, Richard spoke about how there is no trash talk. I would say that player storylines are boring because everyone is the good guy. Do you think the Magic community would ever allow the existence of a heel that's not a cheater? What about allegedly cheating but not confirmed?
I don't think it could happen. I think that's one of those ideas that sounds really good, and I even agree that it'd be really good. It would be interesting to have a heel, but I don't know. People tend to get really riled up, and I imagine that it would probably end poorly in our current era in social media. Like, I just couldn't imagine it actually working out very well.
Wait, like what? Like being a heel? What's wrong?
I mean, I don't know. My experience with Magic social media is it's really easy to accidentally be the heel when you are not even trying to be the heel and you're just trying to comment, and then you have a lot of people get really upset. Maybe it would be different if people were like playing a role and it was like a WWF thing and it was like LSV is the heel or something, and everyone thinks that LSV is actually like, a good guy, but he's just like playing this role. I don't know if that would work as well, but I imagine like if people were trash talking, it would end with people getting pretty offended and upset, and it would be taken in the wrong way rather than being taken as, oh, it's all in, good fun and part of the game or for entertainment. Like that would be my guess, is that it would be really hard to actually pull
What
off.
about like, so WWE, I think everyone's accepted that these are all characters, right? But like, what about like NFL or like NBA or something where you have people that like either they straight up talk trash or, they're very confident / arrogant in the way they comment about other people. Like, what about those kind of heels?
So I'm basing this on like saying the GG emote and then casting a cello package. Like that is enough to make the entire community freak out.
There it is.
Like if that is enough to cause a huge freak out, imagine like I'm imagining a WWE heel or some of the trash talk. Like a lot of my brothers play sports and people can get pretty into the trash talking and think of it as all part of the game, but say some pretty over the top stuff. I don't know. I don't know if I could imagine it working out well in the Magic community. I don't know. What do you guys think? Like, do you think it would go okay to have a heel?
Definitely not. I mean, yeah, like somebody trash talking already sets people off pretty hard, right? So
I think we need a heel. I think it's just a big deal because people don't speak freely today, right? So when someone does, then it looks like pretty bad. But like, I think it makes it entertaining, right? Like to have storylines and, like you need to be able to take it. So when you talk smack and then you lose, then yeah, you need to eat your words, right? Like you can't just like cry about it and whatever afterwards, right? But I think that adds the entertainment value. So I actually think we do need that, right? And I would like someone to say like, I'm the better player than this guy. And I multiplied twice and lost, right? Like, I want someone to actually say something like that, right? Or like, I should have won, right? And they got lucky. Like very mild, like not even like full out trash talk, right? But like no one ever says that, right? They're like, oh, I'm sorry you multiplied. Like, nah, right? You were so happy you multiplied, right? like, come on. Like, we all know you're just trying to like look respectful, right? But we all know that you are very pleased your opponent is going to 5 cards or 4 cards, and you are very pleased that he's on a one-lander, right? Like, yeah, I mean, ideally he'd have like a full board and you'd beat him, but you'll take the free win. Right? But no one says any of that, right? No one says any of that.
GG easy, noob.
Some fist pumps every mulligan. Just like, yes, keep going.
Or getting in their face like, ooh, you missed the land drop, scrub.
Like, would you actually look down on someone if they did that? Like,
no, not at all. I teabag
sure
all
Twitter
the
would
time.
have like a field day initially, right? But you're like,
yeah,
it's normal, right? And it'd be refreshing to see an actual authentic take here, right?
Yeah. I mean, like honestly, people may not like it. It may feel bad when it happens to them, but like, what do I love about watching football? And what do I love about basketball? When they score a touchdown, they celebrate, they dance on the defender. Or when you get dunked on in basketball, oh man, and they do the stare down. Like, oh dude, that's sick, right? Like, I mean, it sucks to have it happen to you, but like, it's hilarious. And you know what? I teabag all the time when I play FPS, like Valorant. I still, like, honestly, if I'm not getting that hip work in, you know what I mean? Like, after I kill you in a game, I'm not playing the game right. So I want it. I want it so bad. Like, that's what I want to see in Magic.
I would really enjoy it too. I think, have you ever watched really old Magic tournaments, like mid 90s when they were just
like
starting
what,
the tournament scene? Like,
tournament?
Yes.
Technically,
like
that's 11 years ago.
Theros era. But no, like the early days, like the first Pro Tours, the way they did coverage back then was really interesting. This was like the MTV era where they were actually broadcasting Magic tournaments on MTV, and they would have the play players mic'd up, and you would have like Mike Long was actually kind of hilarious. And I know he was a cheater and he was actually kind of the heel of the early era, but he actually was cheating as well. But he was always just like talking to his opponents, and he would like stand on his chair and just, it was super, like, it was really interesting to watch. I was watching this game from 25 years ago that has no actual impact on my life, and I was super entertained because the players were entertaining. You could hear them talking and kind of like messing around with each other, and it was very entertaining compared to what we have now. And I don't know how you do that in arena tournaments when you just have two people that are by themselves in a room on a webcam. But in paper tournaments, I think that there's some stuff you could just do structurally that would help make it more personal and more interesting as well, like miking up the players as they talk through the game. Like, I think that would actually be really entertaining. But go check out, there's some of the matches on YouTube of the early years of Magic tournaments, and it's so much different than today, and I think way more entertaining to watch.
I need to see the video where he's standing on his chair. Is he like taunting, or like what is going on? Like,
he kind of like perches on it. I think it might be so he could hide cards underneath himself easier, but he kind of like perches with his feet on the chair like a bird almost. And he like, yeah, it's so strange. But yeah, there's also an MTG commercial that they did where they're pretty brutal to each other. Like, they're just kind of like, oh, he's so good, and this guy, you know, he's so horrible. And it used to be a lot rougher and a lot more heely in the early days of Magic, and it's really much more tame today, I think, as far as coverage and pros. And I don't know, it definitely was more entertaining in the old days.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a tabletop versus arena thing, right? Like, you can't do the like slide the card off the top of your library and like take a peek, right? Or the ultimatum, the Nassif ultimatum, right? Like, you can't do that stuff on arena. It just like happens. So some of that presentation is gone as well.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true.
A Winter 105, has Seth ever considered returning to old against the odd decks that went 5-0 or 05 and go back and try them against the current meta? I'm currently tweaking abs and toughness to work in the current modern meta, as it's one of my favorite against the odds decks.
That's something I have wondered about a lot, if that's something people are interested in. For the most part, I have tried to not reuse too many cards, at least in the same format for against the odds. But we're on episode, I don't even know, 300 and something. So we've used a lot of really sweet against the odds cards and hit some really sweet decks in the past. So I think that could be a good plan for the future, revisiting and updating some of the old decks from the past, because a lot has changed. Like, compared to 5 years ago or whatever, when we were first starting the series, there's so many different cards. The meta is so different. There are so many additions to the deck. So I think it could be fun to go back and revisit some of the old decks. And that's another way that some of these like classic against odds cards can get another chance. Like, and I'm sure there's some people who probably didn't even see the original episode 5 years ago and have started following the content since then. So I think that's a sweet idea, and I'll probably try to do it more moving forward, revisiting some old against the odds decks.
All right, last question. At Kuji, do you think if most content creators started actively seeking out and promoting pro Magic tournaments on their own and watching them, it would get their communities more interested as well, along with WotC making changes you guys suggested? So
yeah. I mean, yes, I think that would definitely help get more people interested, although there also needs to be like tournaments to promote and watch with your audience for that to happen. So it goes both ways to some extent. And I think part of the problem is a lot of the most recent, the MPL just ended up being disastrous in a whole bunch of different ways, but a lot of it, I don't know, just I didn't find personally very entertaining to watch. A lot of it was like pre-recorded, which was weird. And like the whole system of how they did coverage for MPL just, I don't think was ideal. But I think if they can bring back tournaments, things like Worlds or Pro Tours or even GP level tournaments, I think, yeah, that content producers could do a lot to help get more people interested in those events and watching those events.
Part of the problem, I think, is schedule. Right? Because there is no schedule, and it's like literally like a 12-hour block where you're like, come watch Magic with me. Like with other esports, you can be like, okay, there's a certain match going on, and we know like match length is usually like 45 minutes. And then we can all congregate and watch and stream it and then talk about it. Whereas with Magic, it's like hard to figure out when a match is starting. Like, let's follow Paulo. When's his next match? Like unknown. Right. So I think part of it is like scheduling and content. like how the content is actually broken down. But definitely, you know, if content creators love competitive Magic, then their communities will just naturally love it, right? But it needs to be authentic, right? Like competitive Magic needs to be good enough such that the content creators actually want to watch it. And then, you know, they'll naturally promote it, right? But if you're just forcing them to watch it for whatever reason, like it's not good, meta stale, production's not good, then it's going to be not authentic, right? And it's going to come across and it's going to flop. So I think the answer still is make it good. Make it good, and then people will watch it, and some of those people will be content creators, right? And then it'll kind of just, you know, spread like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm an example for this, or maybe we're an example of this. We used to do a lot of coverage of like pro tours when there were actual pro tours and stay up all night watching them and tweeting about them and doing articles and trying to do guesstimate deck lists. And then the world just kind of changed as far as the kind of tournaments that there were, and then even the existence of tournaments. So I think that I would definitely personally love to support and help promote, you know, pro Magic, because I really love watching it. But as you said, there has to be something there that's worth promoting to start with. And we just haven't had that the last couple of years for the most part.
All right. So that's all the fish mail we have for this week. Thank you to everyone who sent in questions. If you have questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air.
And I believe that brings us to the end of episode 350 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. So Richard, Crib, thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And we will be back next week to talk about whatever goes on in the world of Magic. So until then, everyone, have a spectacular week. And this is a crew signing out.